today's video I'm making those viral corn ribs made infamous by TikTok, but in this recipe I'm adding in protein and reducing FODMAPs. I hope you enjoy it. Let's start with the protein. I'm using this Biona brand tempeh that you may recognise from my tofu haul video. Any tempeh that can be sliced into thick rib-style pieces will work. This tempeh is already cut perfectly. If you've never tried tempeh, it's a denser, chewy relation to firm tofu that works well as a meat replacement. Tempeh is a fermented food, so it's prone to having a slightly funky, bitter aftertaste. Today I'll show you how to get rid of any bitterness so you're left with a juicy base ready to soak up all the flavour you can throw at it. This brand is packaged in water, which can make the fermented flavour more obvious. We need to drain off all the liquid and give the tempeh a good rinse. The liquid is where most of the FODMAPs will be, so by removing as much as possible we're helping to naturally reduce the FODMAPs. Steam 200 grams of tempeh in a steamer basket for 10 minutes. Alternatively, you can simmer in a pan or steam in a microwave for 5 minutes. Whichever method you use, turn the tempeh over halfway through. The steamed tempeh softens slightly and becomes juicy and tender. Once steamed, lay down a clean tea towel and pop the tempeh on one half of the towel, leaving space around each slice. Fold over the opposite side of the towel and press the tempeh firmly and evenly until the surface of it feels dry to the touch. Next we'll prepare the corn, and this is honestly the hardest part of the whole recipe. But don't worry, I'm going to share all the tips those 30-second TikToks don't bother to tell you. To make this as safe as possible and avoid your chopping board from slipping, you'll need to lay down the tea towel you used to press the tempeh. Lightly mist the towel with water until it's damp all over. Now when you place your board on top, it's much more secure and grips to the towel. For easier cutting, I recommend cutting the cob in half before attempting to cut lengthwise into ribs. It doesn't look as effective this way, but tastes just as good and it's more likely to save your fingers. Using a freshly sharpened knife and a back and forth rocking motion, cut the corn cob in half to create 2 cobs. Stand the cob upright on its widest, flattest end and using the same rocking technique, cut it in half again from top to bottom. If you have weak wrists like me, you'll need to use your other hand to apply more pressure. Make sure the fingers of your top hand stay above the blade at all times. At this point, the easiest thing to do is lay the quartered cob cut side down and cut it in half again. This will give you 4 pieces from half a cob, with each one holding about 4 to 5 rows of corn on each. However, if you want that slightly curled rib effect, you're going to have to cut thinner pieces. This means cutting each half vertically into 6 pieces. You've got to be really careful to leave enough of the core on each piece to hold the rib intact, not to mention watching your fingers as you cut. Going for that ideal rib width resulted in a lot more waste than I expected, and I'd love to know how many cobs most of the influencers making this recipe went through to get the perfect Instagrammable rib. You can see the difference here between cutting into fourths versus 6. The ideal rib should be about 3 kernels wide, but if you're all worried about creating excess waste, the sharpness of your knife or your cutting skills, then stick with quarters. These taste just as delicious but with a less aesthetic shape. I ended up with a mixture of both. Now for the sake of my FODMAP friends watching, I wanted to see how much of the corn would be low FODMAP. According to Monash, it's half a corn cob or 38 grams. Unfortunately, there was a huge discrepancy here between the 2 portions, with half my cob weighing double the low FODMAP portion, weighing in at 76 grams. This means that if you go by weight in grams, which is what I typically advise, then a low FODMAP serving would be a quarter of a cob or 2 to 3 ribs depending on how you cut them. I'll leave it to you to do your own experiments on how much your cob weighs and to decide how much is right for you. Moving on to the marinade. To a blender, add 200 grams of canned tomatoes using the flesh rather than the juice. Add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon of maple syrup, 2 tablespoons of tamari or soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of asafoetida and half a teaspoon of ground allspice. Whiz everything together in a blender until the sauce is smooth. Add the steamed pressed tempeh into the base of a container and pour over a third of the marinade, spreading it out with the back of a spoon to coat. Add the chopped corn ribs, kernels side down, and drizzle over another third of the marinade. Cover with a lid and pop in the fridge overnight. The marinade thickens and sticks to the corn and tempeh. Line a baking tray with parchment or a non-stick mat and lay out the corn and tempeh in a single layer, leaving space between each piece. Lightly brush the surface with a little of the leftover marinade. Season generously with cracked black pepper and a little salt. I use smoked salt, but plain sea salt is fine too. Pop in the centre of a preheated oven at 200 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, flip the ribs over. Brush the other side with more of the marinade and season again with salt and pepper. Return to the oven for a further 15 minutes. This tempeh is so well seasoned on the outside and juicy on the inside, and it's the perfect texture for a meat-style replacement. This recipe serves two and is best eaten straight from the oven. I popped my ribs on a bed of rocket. The corn is sweet and flavourful with a bit of bite, and I love it when mine catches and chars a little bit on the edges. Brush the remainder of the marinade over the hot ribs as you serve. I ate mine with a rich and creamy potato slaw. The recipe for this will be up soon. And there you have it, from fleeting trend to filling FODMAP friendly meal. I added a squeeze of fresh lime to brighten up the flavours and it finished it off perfectly. As these were oven baked rather than air fried, they didn't curl up into that signature rib shape as much as some of the results I've seen online, but they were deliciously Moorish all the same. If you do try this recipe in the air fryer to get that aesthetic curve, let me know how it turns out. I hope this recipe shows how you can adapt even the most finicky of recipes to suit you. Experimenting with recipes and ingredients, increasing food tolerances, and eating a diverse range of plants and fibre are some of the best things I've ever done for my gut health. I hope this recipe helps you to explore and push your food and FODMAP boundaries. Despite being vegan for years, I haven't used tempeh much in the past. But this was such a big hit even with non-vegans. I'll definitely be adding tempeh into my diet on a more regular basis, and I'll be using this versatile ingredient in a variety of ways. As always, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!